Some cartoon characters hide behind stupidity so well that you forget that they even have a breaking point. And when they finally reach it, they turn ice f***ing cold. SpongeBob is normally one of the most cheerful characters in animation, so you'd expect a terrifying monster appearing right in front of him to cause a little bit of panic. But in an episode that I don't know the name of, who cares, sue me, SpongeBob faces the Flying Dutchman who keeps changing his appearance right in front of him. And instead of reacting like a normal person, he barely gives a bloody damn. The Dutchman keeps transforming, trying to frighten him, while SpongeBob remains completely unfazed. SpongeBob barely even acknowledges the threat in front of him. Our next character, on the other hand, gets his cold moment by doing the exact opposite. He switches to an absolute machine in seconds. You guessed it from the thumbnail, it's my f***ing guy Guido from the timeless masterpiece of Cars, who spends most of the film as Luigi's tiny, cheerful assistant. Nobody expects this little forklift to compete with the massive racing machines around him. Then the final race gives Guido his moment.
Tiny, you're gonna clean his windshield?
Lightning McQueen needs a pit stop, and Guido suddenly goes absolutely bloody mental, changing all 4 tires at ridiculous speed.
I don't think you have any idea how fast I really am.
The entire crowd is stunned as the tiny little guy performs a pit stop faster than anybody expected. For those few seconds, Guido stops being comic relief and becomes the most impressive member of the entire bloody pit crew. The joke character suddenly proves he's been hiding one hell of a talent. Bart Simpson is normally Springfield's resident troublemaker, constantly pulling pranks and making life miserable for everyone around him. But there's a much colder side to him when he discovers that a woman is pregnant and realizes he's going to be responsible. Instead of stepping up, Bart abandons her, leaving her to deal with the situation herself. It's a surprisingly bleak moment because there's no ridiculous prank or clever escape to soften it. The kid who normally acts like nothing matters suddenly makes a decision that shows just how selfish he can be. For once, Bart isn't causing any chaos because it's funny. He's simply walking away from someone who needs him.
I'm pregnant.
Robin spends practically the entire movie being reminded that nobody takes him seriously. The Justice League barely acknowledges the Titans. The other heroes all have their own bloody movies, and even when Robin gets excited at a premiere thinking it's finally his moment, he discovers the film is about Batman again. The audience fucking laughs at him. The Titans try to cheer him up, and Robin is left completely humiliated. Then Slade shows up and makes things even worse, effortlessly defeating the Titans while mocking them. From that point on, Robin becomes obsessed with proving that he isn't just some useless sidekick.
He thought the movie was about him!
He's just a sidekick. He's a nobody.
That obsession eventually starts tearing him away from his friends. When Jade Wilson offers to make a movie about the Titans, Robin finally thinks he's getting what he's always wanted, only for Slade to manipulate the situation and turn the movie into one about Robin alone. Robin accepts, decides the other Titans are holding him back, and breaks up the bloody team. By the end, Slade even uses the crystal to control Robin and force him to attack his own friends. The bloke who spent the entire bloody movie being laughed at finally becomes genuinely dangerous. Not because he suddenly turns evil, but because all of that humiliation and desperation to be taken seriously finally catches up with him.
It's time to eliminate them.
Must eliminate.
And then you've got Gumball, a character whose entire existence is basically one long bloody disaster. He's childish, sarcastic, and usually more interested in making a situation worse than fixing it. But in an episode where the Wattersons are caught up in the chaos of the car park, Gumball gets one of those ridiculous moments where his body becomes the only thing stopping a disaster, as he uses his leg to stop the car from falling. And those are just the warm-up, because once the genuinely cheerful character starts dropping the bloody smiles, things get a hell of a lot darker. Luan Loud is basically what happens when somebody gives a teenager an unlimited supply of terrible jokes and absolutely no adult supervision. As the Loud's family resident comedian, she spends most of her time making puns, pulling pranks, and turning practically every situation into material for her next routine. She's cheerful, energetic, and completely committed to comedy, even when everyone around her looks like they'd rather be launched into space than hear another pun. To Luan, getting a laugh isn't just something she enjoys, it's a massive part of who she is, and when her comedy is challenged, the silly mask can appear surprisingly quickly. In No Laughing Matter, Luan overhears her siblings venting about how annoying her jokes are. Heartbroken, she completely quits comedy, throws away all of her props, and adopts a cold, serious attitude until her siblings scheme to win back her humorous side. She isn't some evil mastermind, but give this girl a goal and, hell, she'll f***ing commit to it.
Okay, everyone huddle around Luan. I always knew I was the light of your life. Okay, so how about we get that power back?
That obsessive side becomes even more obvious whenever April Fool's arrives. For everyone else in the Loud family, April Fool's is a day of harmless nonsense. For Luan, it's the Olympics. She spends the entire year preparing for it, and her family knows better than to underestimate her. In April Fool's Rules, Lincoln attempts to protect himself and the rest of the family from her annual prank attack, because everyone understands that Luan is operating on another level. Her pranks aren't simply random, because she can plan them, disguise them, and wait for exactly the right moment to strike. She understands how her siblings think, which means she can predict what they'll do before they realise they're being played. Remove the goofy music and ridiculous props, and you've basically got a tiny strategist conducting psychological warfare against her own family. The Louds aren't celebrating April Fools, but rather they're surviving it.
Ah! She cut the floorboards!
Then comes Silence of the Luans, which highlights just how deeply Luan's April Fool's persona has traumatized her family. By this point, Luan actually vows that she's retired from pranking altogether, but her family is so utterly terrified of what she's capable of that they treat her like an imprisoned supervillain, locking her up in a basement cell just to be safe. When elaborate pranks start happening around the house anyway, everyone assumes Luan is somehow pulling the strings from behind bars. In reality, Luan is completely innocent and secretly actually baby Lily, following in her footsteps. But the fact that her family genuinely believed Luan was capable of orchestrating full-scale psychological warfare from inside a cell shows just how terrifying her cheerful prankster mask had become to them. She doesn't need superpowers or an evil transformation, as her family's sheer paranoia proves that when April Fool's arrives, the girl who normally tells silly jokes at dinner feels like the ultimate final boss.
April Fool's Day has been officially neutralized. Luan, you hard salami'd me!
It wasn't me. How could I have done that from in here?
And that's what makes Luan such an interesting fit for this list, because she never truly becomes a villain, and her darker moments are still played for laughs. But the contrast is what matters. Her cheerfulness hides an incredibly stubborn personality, and her confidence can turn into obsession when something important to her is threatened. Luan doesn't become a completely different person when the comedy disappears. Instead, the traits that normally make her funny become much more intense. The dedication becomes frightening, and honestly, if Luan ever decided to stop being funny and started taking her schemes seriously, the Loud family might as well pack their bags. Star Butterfly starts off looking like the last person who could ever become genuinely intimidating. She's a teenage magical princess who treats danger like an exciting afternoon activity, constantly charging into battle with her wand, throwing out ridiculous spells and causing enough property damage to make every insurance company in Muni reconsider their career choices. Early Star is energetic, impulsive, and ridiculously cheerful. She doesn't always think before acting, making her feel more like a chaotic kid than a future ruler. But as the series progresses, Star discovers that being a princess isn't just about colourful magic and defeating monsters. She begins learning about Muni's story and the conflict between humans and monsters, and how magic has been used by her family and previous queens. Suddenly, the wand in her hand isn't just a toy anymore. It represents an entire system that has caused serious problems. The change becomes especially noticeable as Star grows more willing to question the world that she inherited. She starts off believing that fighting evil is straightforward. There are villains, there are heroes, and her job is to blast the villains with magic until everything is sorted. But the deeper she gets into Muni's history, the harder that simple view becomes to maintain. She discovers that the conflict between humans and monsters has lasted for generations, and that some people considered villains aren't nearly as simple as she was taught. Star's cheerful attitude doesn't disappear overnight, but her decisions become increasingly serious. She begins understanding that doing what she believes is right sometimes means making choices nobody else is comfortable with. And that becomes important because eventually Star isn't just fighting someone else's war, but she's deciding what happens to the entire magical world.
Had to.
Can you imagine if the power of magic fell into the hands of a monster?
You let us live a lie. We shouldn't even have the throne.
That decision reaches an extremity in Cleveland. With Mina Loveberry threatening Muni and the conflict spiraling, Star decides that magic itself has to disappear. Moon, Eclipser, and the others try to convince her that they can fight Mina together, but Star refuses because she's already made up her mind. She enters the realm of magic and uses the whispering spell with the intention of destroying magic completely. The consequences are enormous because the realm of magic collapses, magical beings and institutions disappear, and the age of magic comes to an end. This isn't Star losing control and accidentally causing some gigantic disaster. She understands what she's doing. She knows destroying magic will cost her something, and willing to erase the entire system because she believes it's the only way to create peace.
I can't believe you actually did it. It looks like the age of magic is coming to a close.
And that's where the cheerful Star becomes genuinely cold. She isn't suddenly evil, and she doesn't stop caring about people. That's precisely why the moment works, as Star becomes willing to make an extreme decision, because she believes preserving magic will cause even more suffering. Earlier, Star might rush into danger because she thinks it will be exciting. This Star walks towards danger because she's already accepted the consequences. There's no goofy grin, ridiculous spell, or carefree attitude saving the moment. She simply decides what needs to happen and follows through. Her darkness doesn't come from becoming heartless, but rather comes from becoming determined enough to make a decision her younger self couldn't imagine. Now, Bill Cipher is technically cheating the premise because the bloke was never exactly a wholesome ray of sunshine, but that's precisely why he belongs here. When Bill first shows up, it's almost impossible to take him seriously. He's a floating yellow triangle wearing a top hat and bow tie, speaking like he's wandered out of the world's most unhinged children's cartoon. He's constantly cracking jokes, making bizarre gestures, and treating reality like one enormous playground. Even when he's threatening someone, there's usually some ridiculous humor attached, but I mean, that's what makes Bill so dangerous. The comedy isn't hiding a harmless character, but it's hiding just how little he cares about anyone else. Bill is a dream demon with absurd power built around manipulation, sadistic humor, and complete disregard for consequences. The first major example is Ford Pines, one of the smartest people in Gravity Falls. Bill approaches him pretending to be a helpful muse, offering knowledge while secretly manipulating Ford into creating a dimensional portal. Ford eventually realizes Bill isn't some friendly supernatural mentor, but by then the damage is done. The bloke has been playing him from the very beginning.
Oh, Gravity Falls, it is good to be back!
And Bill's manipulation doesn't stop with Ford. Once he realizes direct approaches aren't enough, he exploits people's weaknesses. Dipper wants knowledge, Ford wants answers, and Mabel desperately wants to preserve the summer she loves. Bill looks at these desires and sees opportunities. When Mabel is vulnerable for the summer ending, Bill uses blending as a disguise and convinces her to give him the dimensional rift. The second she does, Bill reveals himself, knocks them both out, and sets Weirdmageddon into motion. That's when the silly triangle stops feeling like an entertaining nuisance and becomes an actual nightmare. He's spent the series acting like the world's most obnoxious comedian, but underneath the jokes is someone patiently waiting for the opportunity to tear reality apart. Once Weirdmageddon begins, Bill doesn't bother pretending to be reasonable. He becomes physical and gains the ability to manipulate matter, space, and even time, turning Gravity Falls into his personal playground. Buildings, people, and the environment become things he can alter whenever he wants. He traps people in strange realities and casually toys with the inhabitants because, to him, their suffering is entertainment. And the most unsettling part is that he's still cracking jokes. He doesn't become a grim, silent monster. He remains loud, theatrical, and ridiculously funny while doing things that should be terrifying. The humor doesn't make him less frightening. It makes him more frightening because he's laughing while everyone else is desperately trying to survive. His cheerful attitude isn't a sign that everything is fine, but rather it's a sign that he thinks everything around him is hilarious.
It's finally happening!
Eventually, Bill's biggest weakness turns out to be the same thing that makes him entertaining: his enormous ego. He believes he's smarter and more powerful than everyone else, leading him straight into the trap set by Stan and Ford. Bill enters Stan's mind, expecting to discover the secret behind the memory wipe, only to realize too late that he's been tricked. The memory gun is used on Stan's mind, and because Bill is inside of it, the demon is caught in the blast as well. It's almost fitting. The guy who treats everyone else like idiots is finally defeated because he assumes the humans around him are too stupid to fool him. Bill never really becomes cold because underneath everything, he was already cold. The jokes were simply his favorite way of expressing it. At first, he's funny, the triangle who says ridiculous things. By the end, he's the funny triangle who could destroy reality and thinks that it would be a brilliant afternoon.
What's happening to me?
Scarlet is a completely different kind of transformation because, unlike Bill, she doesn't announce herself as a villain from the beginning. She enters Total Drama as the quiet brainiac, a highly intelligent contestant who appears calm, polite, and most interested in using her enormous brain to survive. Next to Max, who constantly screams about becoming the world's greatest supervillain, despite barely operating his own inventions. Scarlet looks almost painfully sensible. She's the one fixing his machines, helping him during challenges, quietly putting up with his ridiculous behaviour. She rarely demands his attention or causes unnecessary drama, seeming like the contestant who would rather solve a problem than start one. But that's what makes her reveal so effective, because the audience isn't watching a loud villain pretending to be nice. They're watching someone intelligent deliberately hide what she's capable of. Throughout the season, Scarlet's intelligence becomes increasingly obvious. She can repair Max's inventions, understand strange technology scattered around the island, and eventually discovers that something is seriously wrong with the island. In This Is the Pits, she discovers that some wildlife isn't real, while later finding evidence that the island itself is artificial. In Hurl and Go Seek, Scarlet discovers a control panel connected to the island's central computer and attempts to hack into it, only for Max to accidentally ruin her attempt by vomiting on the equipment. It's a ridiculous total drama gag because, of course, the one thing capable of stopping a genius hacker is Max's stomach. But underneath, the joke is an important detail. Scarlet isn't merely clever enough to understand the technology. She's interested in controlling it.
It was mechanical? Hey, I bet everything down here is. If I can piece together a transmitter to send out signals, who knows what we could find?
Scarlet Fever changes everything. The contestants discover that the island is essentially a massive artificial environment controlled by a computer, with a self-destruct sequence activated. Scarlet and Max are tasked with helping shut it down, but once they reach the control room, Scarlet reveals her true personality. She admits that she's been using Max because his incompetence made him useful as a shield, then turns against him and attempts to take control of the island. Her goal isn't simply to win anymore, because she wants the $1 million badly enough to sacrifice Max, the other contestants, and the entire island to get it. This is the same quiet girl who spent most of the season calmly fixing things while Max shouted about evil plans. Suddenly, she's the one running the evil plan.
Scarlet, you look different.
This is the real me. I am evil!
The most interesting part is that Scarlet doesn't suddenly gain intelligence or power. She already had those things. What changes is that she stops hiding how ruthless she is. Once she wants control, she doesn't hesitate. She manipulates the island systems, turns the technology against the contestants, and treats everyone around her as expendable. Even Max becomes nothing more than an obstacle. Eventually, Max works with the others to trick Scarlet, allowing them to stop her plan. Scarlet is eliminated alongside Max, but her actions leave the island system in chaos, and that's what makes her transition so unsettling. Scarlet doesn't become evil because she loses her temper. She becomes evil because she finally decides she doesn't need to pretend anymore. The polite genius was always capable of being ruthless. She just didn't realize how far she was willing to go.
Yeah, I'm done with evil for now.
No, please! Don't send me away with him! Anyone but me!
Danny Fenton is basically the opposite of a cold-blooded powerhouse when we first meet him. He's a goofy teenager caught between school, annoying classmates, his eccentric ghost-hunting parents, and the small problem of being half ghost. Even after becoming Danny Phantom, he still spends plenty of time joking around with Tucker and Sam, behaving like a teenager who somehow gets superpowers before learning how taxes work. He's brave but also emotional, impulsive, and dependent on the people around him. Then their ultimate enemy shows us a future where all of that goes horribly wrong. Dan Phantom, originally known as Dark Danny, is an alternate future version of Danny who becomes one of the most dangerous beings in the series. He isn't simply Danny with a darker costume. He's the result of Danny losing the people and emotional support that keep him from giving in to his worst impulses. Once that happens, the cheerful teenager we've been following basically disappears.
All you wanted was to make the hurt go away. I honored your wishes. No more painful human emotions.
The tragedy begins when Vlad manipulates Danny while he's dealing with grief caused by a catastrophic accident. Danny's emotions become so overwhelming that he asks Vlad to remove his ghost powers and separate his ghost half from him. Sounds like a pretty good plan, right? Remove the powers that cause the death of literally everyone you care about. Instead, things go to hell pretty fast. After getting separated into human and ghost, Danny's ghost half rips the evil ghost out of Vlad, and the two merge into quite literally one of the most terrifying entities in all of cartoon history. And
Sadly, that freed you up to rip the... And when my evil ghost half mixed with yours?
as Vlad himself says, what happens to his human half is better left unsaid, for good reason.
Some things, my boy, are better left unsaid.
This transformation is disturbing because Dan isn't some random villain who happens to resemble Danny. He is Danny. He has Danny's memories, abilities, and understanding of the people that he used to care about. The difference is that his emotional restraints have been stripped away. Danny's compassion becomes irrelevant. His hesitation and humor disappear. What remains is Danny's power combined with the worst possible version from his anger and grief. Imagine taking every bad day you've ever had, removing everyone who helps you calm down, and then giving the result enough power to flatten a city. By the time the episode reaches its main conflict, Dan has become absurdly powerful. He's spent time fighting other ghosts, and unlike the younger version of Danny, has no reason to hold back. When present-day Danny encounters himself, Dan sees him as a younger, weaker version of himself who hasn't experienced the events that created him. The difference is massive. Danny still jokes, relies on his friends, and believes that there has to be a way to save people. Dan simply doesn't care. He's willing to manipulate, threaten, and destroy anything standing between him and his goals. The contrast works because we've watched Danny struggle with homework, argue with his parents, and make stupid decisions with his powers. Then Dan appears and shows exactly what those powers look like when the person using them abandons restraint. The goofy ghost boy has effectively become the final boss of his own life. What makes Dan especially frightening is that he isn't emotionless. He's driven by emotions that have become completely corrupted. His anger and bitterness consume the personality that once made Danny heroic. When he confronts the younger Danny, he doesn't simply want to defeat him. He wants to ensure the future leading to his existence remains intact. The younger Danny becomes a threat because he proves that the future doesn't have to happen. Fortunately, present-day Danny doesn't fight him alone. With help from Vlad and Clockwork, the timeline can be changed and Dan can ultimately be defeated. Clockwork prevents the events that create him, erasing this horrifying future version of Danny from existence. Danny, therefore, isn't just a villain, but rather he's a warning about what happens when grief, anger, and power completely overwhelm the person beneath. The cheerful teenager doesn't become cold because evil suddenly looks fun. He becomes cold because every reason he once had to care gets destroyed, and makes Dan Phantom one of the darkest possible futures for someone who originally just wanted to protect his town and survive his high school. And that's what happens when the cheerful character finally drops the smile. From Luan's relentless pranks to Star's drastic decision, Bill's nightmare behind the jokes, Scarlet's hidden ruthlessness, and Dan's terrifying future. These characters prove that comedy can hide something seriously dangerous. If you enjoyed the video, smash that like button, subscribe, and stick around for more. Cheerio!